blocker of Hextall. Fed around to the far side. Flyers a little lax in picking up Robinson, who puts it cross ice off the body. Breakaway Eklund. He's gone for the hat trick. He's in. Shot. Score. Hat trick, Pelly Eklund. That for Philadelphia in their history is their 12th playoff hat trick, and the other one this year, Tim Kerr against the Islanders in the first game of that set.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&amp Podcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. Indeed, we are back with the O&amp Podcast brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com, episode number 103. And let's hear from the third member of our panel, the great Dan Silver.
Good night, everyone. What's going on?
How you doing? Crazy. A lot going on.
First place Flyers.
Yeah, first place Flyers. We got to talk about that. And it's so great that we're going to have our distinguished guest right from the outset from Rocket Sports, credentialed writer, AHL, NHL, Flyers, Canadians, Laval Rocket, Lehigh Valley Phantoms, AHL Report, Flyers Report. This is one busy lady. Welcome back, Amy Johnson.
Well, wow, what an introduction. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to be with you guys. I always appreciate the invitation. And it's a lot of hockey to talk about right now.
Yeah, it sure is. We're going to go through some of the latest breaking information. There's apparently some coronavirus cancellations that affect not only the AHL, as we will discuss, but the NHL. We'll get into that. And, of course, being a Habs reporter, we got to ask about that Montreal Canadiens squad that a lot of people are taking notice of. But first, we have three back-to-back games that the Flyers played versus Boston, the Devils, and, of course, the New York Islanders. And, Amy, I'm going to go right to you. You know, the Flyers have not exactly followed the best process or playing the right way in accumulating these 15 points in 10 games, going 7-2-1, tied for first in the makeshift East Division. They played a little bit better last night. So what's your summary over these last 6 games?
Well, here's the thing. Yes, you're right. They've taken the I think hardest route to the standings in which they're at right now. I had put a stat out on Twitter yesterday. It was something like, despite the standings, they're like tied for second in the worst, like, negative goal differential in the league, worst for shots against. Like, the stats were just horrible. If you look at the stat sheet, you would think there's no way that this team can possibly have the record that it does. But They do. And yes, they've shown some improvement. That first period that they played against the Islanders on Saturday night was probably one of the best periods of hockey that they've put together cohesively, at least this season for sure. And they did have improvement overall in playing a better full 60 last night. But there is still a lot of improvement that needs to be made. So the big question for me is it the injuries, with Couturier going out early, then you had Myers go down, then you had Frost go down. Was it a lack of cohesiveness because of the injuries and having to slot guys in and the system just wasn't working? Or is this a result of, thanks to COVID-19, there not being any preseason games and not enough time for teams to like the Flyers, to get those systems gelling and find all of that chemistry leading up to the regular season? That's the big question for me.
Yeah. Dan, what you're good with looking at the numbers like shots for, shots against, and looking at Corsi expected goals and things like that. What's going on with this team?
Yeah, I mean, Amy said there's no getting around the fact that almost any metric that you look at that you would say is a metric that would lead to underlying success, they're not good at. I think you mistakenly said, Amy, about their goal differential. Their goal differential is actually not that bad. The shot differential. is horrendous. I mean, they showed a stat after the first period last night that their shot differential is like minus 100.
Yeah.
And the next worst team in the league is minus 75, and then it's minus 50. So they're like, there's no one else even in their ballpark, right? So it's like this Flyers team you can kind of look at in a few ways. If you're a believer that this team is one of the most talented teams in the league, you can look at it and be like, holy crap, they're playing horribly compared to how they could be playing, and they're still 7-2-1. So, things are really they're getting lucky now. Imagine when they start playing better. That's, I guess, one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is, oh man, things are just going to fall apart. Like this team, the underlying metrics are horrendous, and they're so much worse than other teams that it's just going to fall apart. And look, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. I mean, I think all of us thought going into the season that this was a playoff team. I probably had them a little bit higher than I would put them at right now, just because of the issues that we talk about, right? I mean, I do think that Shane Gostisbehere coming back is going to help stabilize that top pair as long as he stays healthy, because as much grief as he takes, I still think he's a pretty good hockey player. And if he can stay healthy, I think him and Provorov look okay there. Myers-Sandheim, you've got the second pair. But the problems remain that third pair is a disaster, no matter who you have, Gustafsson, Haig, Braun, whatever. And the forwards, he benched Travis Konechny because of issues where he, made a bad play in the offensive zone and led to a 4-on-1 the other way. I mean, last night, Claude Giroux and Jake Voracek on that Barzal goal was embarrassing, their coverage. I mean, there's still a lot of issues with this team. And so I still think we don't really know exactly what we have, but I do still feel fairly confident in saying that they are not as bad as those underlying metrics, but they're clearly not as good as their record is right now.
Yeah. Jeff?
Well, they seem to be winning in spite themselves, right? The way I'm looking at it is I was listening to your special with Anthony DeMarco, and he said one thing that kind of like made me think. He said, good teams find a way to win. Now, I'm not saying this is a great team, but it kind of has a ring to it. I know what he was talking about. Like, they're winning. They're winning despite what they're doing. And it's kind of incredible. I think there are one or two moves that they're going to make later on that could hopefully help solidify what they're doing right now. I like to see the progression a little bit faster than what's going on. I mean, they were getting better the last three games. A little bit by little bit, they made an incredible step, I think, in the game last night on the Isle with the Islanders. I just want to see more progression, I guess, a little faster. I don't want to see whole periods given away. I want to see maybe shifts given away in spurts here and there.
Yeah, and Amy, you think about that shot differential, and you go back to the game in Boston, particularly The second one, which was a 6-1 blowout that they lost, and Carter Hart really loses it. And it speaks to how much these goalies have really had to deal with in terms of not only the number of shots, which is enough, but the quality of shots. And Carter didn't exactly handle that very well at the end of the game.
Well, I think it's it's a combination of obvious frustration, as Kevin Hayes said after that game that was just an embarrassing performance. I think they would all probably agree with that, but also the fact that despite the fact that Carter Hart is an elite goaltender and is the starter for the Philadelphia Flyers, he's still very young. And so emotionally and as far as the mental game goes, we all know how cerebral goaltenders can be. It's a lot of pressure on a goaltender, particularly one who's as young as Carter, despite the fact that he's had, very plenty of experience in high pressure moments in the last couple of years. And I found it pretty commendable to him, to react that way. Is it advisable? Maybe not always, but it was an honest emotional reaction. Claude Giroux even said he considered joining him with smashing his stick as well. But for Carter to then turn around and immediately flip the switch, walk into the media availability and want to apologize and say that he feels that it wasn't professional of him to do that and so forth. To me, that shows just how professional Carter Hart actually is. He takes his job very seriously. He takes his place as an icon, as a role model, and knows that people are watching him, and he takes all of that very seriously. And so while I don't know that he needed to apologize, I felt that it was actually very big of him and very mature of him to do so. So I think that's going to be one of those things where, Carter Hart has a lot of pressure on him to be the number one, to be a good number one. Thankfully, he has a really good mentor in Moose. Brian Elliott seems to be a very steady, calming force for him and for the team, for that matter. But I think the biggest thing was Carter Hart then coming back and playing that next game that he played after he sat one game out, and having a pretty solid performance in net. I think that kind of put everything back in place, calmed everything down, and it was, business as usual. You could just move on from there.
Yeah, definitely. Dana, just to touch on that last point with the Bruins game, I was listening to Jason Martinez, and he was talking about how, I think it was on the the last goal by Marchand. One of the reasons Carter Hart was so frustrated was because the Flyers' coverages were so bad. He was starting to do the job of covering more of the net because the players weren't playing their system, and it ended up costing him on a goal like that. So it just speaks to how the system itself can break down, and it's not always the goaltender.
Yeah, Carter Hart is he's a perfectionist. He's one of the reasons you don't really worry about him is because it seems to me, and I don't live with him, but it seems to me like every single part of his life is structured and built around being the best possible athlete / goaltender that you can possibly be, right? Like, I'm guessing Carter Hart's not out having drinks when some of the guys are out having drinks. I'm guessing that literally all he does, it's kind of like Ivan Provorov. Like, they are both athletes in the fullest degree, the fullest definition of the word, where everything they do is built around becoming a better hockey player. And it's funny with Carter Hart, he's so when you hear him talk, he's so mature for his age that I joked about a couple years ago. I was like, he's going to turn into a serial killer, because it's impossible for somebody to be so focused and so non-emotional about things as he sounds that at some point he's going to snap, right? Well, obviously I was joking, but like you see in that game, what happens when someone like that, who's so calm and collected all the time, snaps. He lost it, right? He broke his stick over the net, and if Ron Hextall did that in a game, you'd have been like, oh, ho-hum, there goes Ron Hextall doing that again. But this is Carter Hart, who doesn't do this. So I think in that sense, it kind of can serve as like a wake up call for the guys a little bit. But you know, he's a guy that you just don't worry about because of what he puts into his craft and what he puts into making himself such a great athlete. But there will be ups and downs. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you've got Elliott and he's looked so good so far this season, it's a big deal in a shortened season like this.
Yeah, there's no question that it's really helped him. And that's one of the reasons I figured why Carter Hart has been trying to learn the bullet with butterfly wings by the Smashing Pumpkins. Despite all his rage, he's still just a rat in a cage, right? But,
literally in a cage.
Yeah, exactly. So, Amy, we come back against the Devils, and the Flyers won back-to-back games where you could honestly say, again, they weren't exactly playing the right way, but they found a way to. It's coming off that disappointing back-to-back losses versus the Bruins, and found their game in spots enough to win both of those games in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. They did. I think the sudden injection of Shane Gostisbehere back on the back end was helping things. That's a bit of a calming presence especially when you don't have Philippe Myers and your Selke winning forward is still out. One of the things that really has stood out to me since that Devils series and all through this week, I know Alain Vigneault talked a lot about the fourth line and how much he has liked their play. I mean, I believe it was the second Devils game in that fourth line, Bunnaman's line was out the most of any line throughout that entire period. Connor Bunnaman, and not to take nothing away from Raffl or Aubé-Kubel, but Connor Bunnaman has really been impressing me. I liked his play when he played in the AHL for the Phantoms. He's been good in kind of spurts, but this week he has really, for me, quietly been one of the most improved forwards. He is not afraid to go to dirty areas. He's constantly got a net front present. He got robbed for a couple of pretty close opportunities battling in through traffic through the crease. His face-off numbers have been off the charts. He was, I think, 90% 2 games ago at the face-off dot. I think last night he was 8 for 9, something like that. So he's been a very solid fourth line center. And I think if you've got that kind of depth on the team, once the top 6 get their act together, I think things could really come into a really solid picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they've kind of stumbled into it. It looked good with Lawton on that fourth line. Looks even better and maybe a little bit more of what they need with Connor Bunnaman with that extra bit of physicality.
Mm-hmm. I think so. And No, go ahead.
I was just real quick on Bunnaman. One thing I want to say about him is that he's one of these guys who, like, you hear it every year in camp. Like, wow, we can't believe how much Connor Bunnaman improved his skating. That was like last year in camp. Right. And this year it's like Kevin Hayes. Connor Bunnaman is the most improved player in camp. Then you look at like his OHL stats, right? Okay. His first year in the OHL, he had 15 points. The next year he had 38 points. The next year he had 52 points. The next year he's captain of the Kitchener Rangers. Like, he strikes me as a player who, and he's never going to be, a first or second line player, doesn't have the skill, but he strikes me as the kind of guy, the kind of kid like a Farabee, whose work ethic is insane, and he's going to improve himself every year. One year he gets a lot faster. One year he gets, a lot better on faceoffs. Like, I think he's the kind of player who's probably going to be on the Flyers for a long time because he just seems like one of those kids who's going to keep getting better.
Yeah, he's winning 58% of his faceoffs, and that's about a 20 percentage point improvement. I know it's a real small sample size, but still, that's very impressive. And it speaks to what you're talking about. So there's not all bad news. We've mentioned some tough sledding for the Flyers. And Chef, let me turn to you in terms of what went down last night. What one player, and AV's been asking for this from the veterans, who's really been doing a really good job out there, is JVR. And he's having a heck of a year. I believe, if I have my numbers correct, I don't have it quite in front of me. He was leading them in scoring with 5 goals and 8 assists for 13 points. Yeah, I mean he's all over the place. You notice that play on the first goal by Farabee, where he makes just a little effort play to tip a puck. It goes right to Farabee. It's in the back of the net. That speaks to what was going on with him. That extra little bit of attention to detail and hustle.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny because I made a joke, like, because everybody was just like piling on him, and then he gets those 2 goals in the game. They were just, for some odd reason, they're just piling on him this year. Okay, I get it. This is JVR from last year. We're not talking about JVR from last year. This guy has put in the time, put in the effort. I mean, when we had Jason Bertitas on, I said he's looking pretty good this year. He goes, well, he shouldn't he? I mean, he took a lot of heat. Of course he did, and I think it rang true. I think he took a lot of that to heart. Possibly, maybe he wasn't in the best shape all through last year, banged up maybe or whatever. But it seems like now he's healthy. And, I made the joke like he's going to get 30 goals in a short season, isn't he? Ha, 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 and he's really going to stick it to our face. I hope he does. I hope he really does. I mean, the most impressive thing about him is when you see plays, and I know Dan had talked about it with Jake and Giroux on that goal last night where they were just trailing. I thought Jake was covering Giroux at 1 second. At one point it looked like or G was covering Jake or whatever. But the point being, earlier in the game, it was JVR that broke up 2 plays, and sent play going the other way. His defense has come so far this season. He seems to be. I don't know. He's not faster. I don't think he's that much faster, but I just think he's using his brain more. He's going to where the puck's going to be. He's not chasing the puck. His anticipation is good this year. But he needs that because Hayes is slacking. I made a comment. Do we know if he's hurt or something like his skating gait is completely off. And if you saw when he had that breakaway chance last season, he was gone and he had that one first big stride. He doesn't have it this year. So I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. We're going to cover a little bit more, but Amy, I know that you can't stick around for too much longer. We're going to get back into some other topics, but while we have you here, just a couple of things. The Montreal Canadiens are red hot right now. They're the talk of the league. Marc Bergevin was under the gun for a long time in Montreal, and now he could be elected mayor.
Still is.
It seems. Well, what are they for real? Is like, did they emerge last year with these 2 young centers and kind of, take that next step, waiting to get those extra pieces, which perhaps Marc Bergevin has provided?
Well, it's a very good question. They certainly, everyone is very high on the Habs this year. They've come out of the gate flying so far. Just got handed their first regulation loss on Saturday night. But you're right. Over the course of the summer playoffs, even Jesperi Kotkaniemi and Nick Suzuki really emerged as some pretty high quality young centers. And yes, they, the Canadians have been grooming them for that. Claude Julien was kind of forced into making the discovery of their talents when Max Domi wasn't playing up to snuff and had to do some line shuffling during the playoffs. And then suddenly the kids started playing really well and kind of took off from there. And yes, now on top of that, Bergevin went out and was very active in the extended offseason. Tyler Toffoli seems to have, it's funny when players who have had good runs in the past and they start to run into, a slump with their current team. Sometimes it takes a change of scenery. And Tyler Toffoli is certainly showing that now. He, in the 2 games that they played on the road in Vancouver against the team that he just got done playing for, he scored 5 goals in 2 games against his former club, including a hat trick. He's been just lights out. Young prospect Jake Evans, who has been playing for the Laval Rocket in the AHL for a while, seems to have finally permanently kind of made carved out his spot in he's kind of the Connor Bunnaman of the Montreal Canadiens. He's that fourth line center that's got some grit to him. He's got some size. He's physical, but he's got quite a shot as well, and he's really coming into his own this season as well. So the thing with the Canadiens, they have speed again. They've got a little bit of size now. They're not the smallest team in the league anymore, so that's helping with their board battles and just in general their physicality. And they're finally really, while they didn't go out and get that number one center, and they still really kind of needed to shore up a top pairing left-handed defenseman, but the pieces that Bergevin put together have come together really well so far. Now, they didn't look great on Saturday, and even in some of their wins, they haven't necessarily played as well as, the final score might let you think. So again, we're still in that wait and see. It's early. They play 4 times this week, 2 against Vancouver and 2 against Ottawa at home. And we'll see if they can, they ran into their first bit of offensive trouble on Saturday night when they got shut out. So we'll see if the scoring can continue. But right now, I got to say, they're looking better than they have in a few years. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to watch one of the many storylines in the NHL this year. Some of the changes that came about. Of course, one story we can't get away from, and we wanted to talk a little bit about the opening of the AHL season. And it's run into some difficulty because of the coronavirus. We just heard the New Jersey Devils had to close down their practice facility or their facilities in general until February 6th. What do you know about that, and what's going on with the AHL in that regard as well?
It's really difficult for the AHL. I was shocked. I want to say that it was either last night or Saturday night. The Henderson Silver Knights, which is the new AHL franchise for the Vegas Golden Knights, were in the middle of a preseason game against the San Jose Barracuda, the Sharks AHL team. And after the second intermission, the teams came back out to the benches to start the third period, but they didn't come onto the ice, and eventually were all sent back to their dressing rooms, and then the game got canceled because in the course of that time, they received a positive COVID test result. Wow. And so everything had to get shut down. This is where you'll see, for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, their preseason schedule has been changed 3 times since it was originally announced a week ago, and had 3 times rescheduled games for this past weekend, and all of them ended up getting canceled because of issues with Hershey, and then his issues with Penguins, and it was a mess. They're finally, fingers crossed, playing their first and now only preseason game tomorrow night against the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins in Allentown. But the issue for the AHL, we look at the game that got canceled in the middle of the game over the weekend. The big question for me was, well, why weren't test results back before games started? And perhaps it's a financial issue. It costs more money to get the faster, more rapid test results. The AHL is barely hanging on by a fingernail as it is. Who knows? That's a question mark if that's an issue or not. They just today, the league and the Players Association just ratified a modified collective bargaining agreement for just this season. So they've settled on that. The season is supposed to kick off on Friday. However, the Canadian division, which will be Laval, the Belleville Senators for the Ottawa franchise, the Toronto Marlies for the Maple Leafs franchise, the Manitoba Moose, which is the Winnipeg Jets AHL affiliate, and now the Stockton Heat is not going to play in the U.S. They're going to play in Calgary, closer to their parent club. That Canadian division will not start this weekend. It's been confirmed actually just a little while ago by the AHL. Because the province of Ontario has not yet approved those 2 teams, Ottawa, the Belleville Senators and the Toronto Marlies, haven't approved them to play yet, even without fans in the building. And so there's a big question mark in the air as to when the Canadian division is going to get started. So it's a mess. It's just a mess, and I think it's going to be one of the most volatile storylines going forward. It's a really tough season for the American League as it is. There are teams that had to opt out because it wasn't going to be financially viable for them to play this year. And I think it's really going to be a day-to-day, just biting your fingernails to see, are we getting through another day? So hopefully we'll see.
Yeah, hopefully the case. Wish we could end on a better note, but I have the AHL package. The Flyers have some players, and one of the phenomenons we're going to see, because the OHL hasn't been playing, we're going to see a lot of young players that are going to get professional time. And I wish we had a little bit more time, but you got to scoot off to a Montreal Canadiens game, or at least covering it. I do. Thank you so much for stopping by to visit with us tonight, and we'd love to have you back again very soon.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure talking with you guys. It's always a fun conversation, and I appreciate you having me on, and have a great rest of the show. I know it's going to be, and I'll talk to you again soon.
All right, you got it. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, that was a great appearance by Amy. And of course, you can catch her at the AHL Report, at the Flyers Report, and of course, she can be found on Twitter at Flyers Rule, Definitely one of the great Twitter handles out there. And before we continue, just a reminder, FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B podcast is sponsored also by Jim's South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia. You got to check it out. 4 decades of the best cheesesteaks and hoagies in the grandest Philly tradition. Anytime you're nearby there, you got to check them out. And, if you live by 400 South Street and you can't get there for some reason, maybe it's snowing or something, they use DoorDash, and they could get that delicious food right to your door. Jim's Steaks and Hoagies, right at 400 South Street. Okay, gents, we're back. I wanted to just kind of delve into, Dan, if we could get into a little bit of the message sending by AV to TK, and he sits for Sam Moran in that first Islanders game. Sam only gets 5 minutes, but there's a message there, right? And I'm wondering if there's some other players that might have been on that list in addition to TK, maybe some players that play center ice that he can't send a message just now because they have so many injuries there.
Yeah, what I kind of love about what's going on with the Flyers right now is that despite their record, you'd have some teams that if they have this record, you'd probably hear the coach and GM would be sort of talking about the wins and, they're happy. But, both the fans, obviously, since Flyers Twitter loves to, have issues with the team, even when things are going well, but things aren't going well from the underlying process. But the coach and the GM realize that too. And so, it's strange that you'd have a team who has a record of, what were they, 5-2-1 going into that game against the Islanders, and they bench the guy who's second in points on the team going into that game, Travis Konechny. And I think there was a lot that went into that decision, because you're right. Like, Kevin Hayes hasn't really been that great this season. Like, he could have been benched maybe. Claude Giroux's had some defensive lapses, although he's been okay. But, clearly they made a decision that I think a lot of it had to do with a play that Konechny made against the Devils, where he kind of Ghost had pinched in defensively. And when he does that, Konechny's supposed to stay back on the point. But instead, Konechny decided to try and go down low behind the net to forecheck a Devils player who was coming out from behind the net. And he really should have taken the body. Instead, he reached out with his stick. He missed the puck. He ended up behind the net and is a 4-on-1 the other way. And that is probably the main play that resulted in Konechny being benched. But he hadn't been that strong in that game or the games before it. And so they clearly realized that, hey, we're probably going to be worse off without Travis Konechny against the Islanders. However, we need to send a message that we can't keep playing like this. We've got to be better 5-on-5. We've got to be playing the positional way that our coach wants us to play. And so he decided to bench Konechny, and they still win the game. Konechny's back in the lineup for that second game against the Islanders, and wasn't particularly great, but he didn't make any horrible defensive plays like he made in the game against the Devils. But it just serves to show that even when the team's winning, this staff can identify things that need improving, and they're not going to be fooled by wins. They're going to keep improving the team based on what they're seeing with the underlying process, and it hasn't been good enough. So I thought it was a really great sign that he had the guts to bench Konechny in a situation like that.
Yeah, I agree. Accountability is something that hasn't been here for a while, and it's one of the reasons AV was, brought in with that veteran staff that he brought in. There was definitely going to be just that. Chef?
Well, I want to even add further, as like if we look back on Flyers coach, the last couple that we had, there was never an adjustment. We see adjustments now. I mean, we're seeing that a coach can change his game plan during a course of a series, let alone a course of a game, let alone a course of a period. I mean, we haven't seen that in a long time. So I think that's good. AV and the team are not just sitting there letting the game happen to them. They're taking their adjustments, and they're taking it period by period now, because we saw how great they came out. I was like, wow, that first Islanders period. I was like, oh my God, this team, they look like a completely different team, and it shows what they can do when they follow the game plan. And then somewhere along the line, they went awry, and it was nice yesterday to see some semblance of that back. There were lapses, but again, overall, it seems like they got a game plan, and each game they seem to be getting a little bit better. And I just want to see more progression faster. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, last night versus a team that they don't match up very well against, they did a good job. For the most part, they deserved the win. They had some lapses. One of the worst ones, Dan, this really got on me. You talked about it earlier, that coverage blown by Jake and G that left Barzal wide open. It was an unstoppable shot. But what started that sequence was Robert Haig this is like time, place, score 101. You don't take that shot without getting it on net. And it's almost like a clearing pass for the opposition. Braun gets flat-footed, and you know the rest of the story. And that's the type of thing that's just shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, I mean, I posted on Twitter because I saw the goal by Barzal, and I didn't really realize what had happened. And then they started showing different angles on the broadcast, and they show this great angle from behind the play that basically showed what happened. And you've got Hay gets caught way up ice. Yeah. And then, you've got two Islanders going to the corner, and two Flyers go into the corner, including Jake, leaving Matt Barzal wide open in front. And I mean, and Giroux, you couldn't have glided any slower if you wanted to. Giroux is basically trailing right behind Barzal. He's watching him. And I understand that people are saying, hey, this is on Haig, this is on Voracek. But here's the thing, like, I play hockey. If I've got a guy in front of me who's wide open in front of the net, I'm not going to be gliding towards him. Like, I'm going to realize that he's the most dangerous player on the ice. None of my teammates are going to get to him, and I got to go after him a little bit harder. You know what I mean? And so it's just like, come on, Captain Claude, you got to be better than that, man. You got to go after him. It's Matthew Barzal. And yeah, he set up the overtime goal for Kevin Hayes. That was great, but you got to be better defensively. I mean, it goes back to when people want to talk about how the core of this team might be flawed, the way that they play. And I get it. Everyone says Giroux worked harder than anyone else out there. And, he's a very good hockey player. And I've got 2 Claude Giroux jerseys, but you got to skate a little harder when Matt Barzal is wide open in front of the net, man.
I agree. Totally. But, Chef, there's a lot of good news. And one of the stories that came out of yesterday was Joel Farabee, offensive confidence, that really a great shot on the first goal. And we talked about it earlier where JVR made that good stick play to put the puck right on him. And he just whizzed it right by Ilya Sorokin, who was in net last night. And he just played with confidence. And then I think the second goal, he had his stick back. He was right in shooting position, and he whizzed it right up, I think it was high blocker side. And then the third one, it just hit off of him. But credit to him. He's in front in the dirty area. Joel Farabee, if he could emerge as more aggressive as a shooter and more willing like he was last night a little bit more frequently, that would make a big difference in his development.
When Amy was just on, we talked about the shot differential, and Dan had mentioned it as well. And the funny thing is, if you look at all the statistics and analytics, they score when they're shooting. They're getting into the good spots, and their scoring ratio is pretty good for the amount of shots they're taking. The problem is they're not taking enough shots. We keep seeing that other pass. I mean, I think that 25% of their problems for this team would be, hey, shoot the puck, because we're seeing that what they're doing that they didn't do last year is they're positioning themselves into good places to where they can score more down low. I think Dan mentioned it a couple shows ago. They're down low around the paint. They're hungry for goals. It's just, and one good thing about the point men is when they are, we mentioned Haig missing that. For a lot of times here, they're getting them on. And I just think the shoot first mentality should be creeping more into this thing. I mean, Konecny, a couple times he has a good shot too. Just as good as Farabee's, or maybe even a little bit better, but he was in two good positions to shoot last night and he passed it. He tried that extra pass. So I think there's something to take away from that. If they can shoot more, if that mentality's got to be there, I think you're going to get better results, and you won't be in a position to be chasing games all the time.
Yeah, they are too differential and not aggressive enough when they get these opportunities. I think that is something that kind of comes from the top of the leadership group as well. You look at who are the leaders. They're pass-first players for the most part. And it's only in the last 5-6 years that Giroux has become a little bit more aggressive. But that's something they're going to have to look at to make an emphasis. We know these shooting percentages, Dan, aren't going to last with some of these players, but it's a lot more feasible to think that the shooting percentages will be high if they're in the right spots in front of the net, something they're doing a better job of, like Chef mentioned.
Yeah, they're scoring a lot of dirty goals in front of the net, which is important. But since you asked about Farabee, one thing that I'll mention is that if you look at Travis Konecny, like he was getting, decent scoring chances. Trying to go to his career yearly stats. So he was, his first year in the league, he scored 11 goals in 70 games, very dangerous. But then he said he really spent the offseason like working on his shot and watching film of guys scoring goals, like on wrist shots, snapshots from maybe 10 to 20 feet out from the net, which was a place that he wasn't scoring goals, taking those shots when he was a rookie. Then he doubled his goal output to 24 goals the next year, and he was scoring on some of those types of goals where you're beating the goalie by disguising your shot a little bit and your shot's a little bit harder. I feel like that's kind of like what we saw from Farabee last night, because his first two goals were absolute snipes. I mean, They were ones where he was 10 to 15 out from the net. He was taking a pass, and the puck was right off his stick, top shelf, beat the goalie clean both times. And like you said, there's not a lot of guys on this team who can do that regularly. And I probably think that Joel Farabee probably can't do that regularly. I mean, I think those were just happened to be two really, really good shots, and I wouldn't expect to see like him come out and score a hat trick in the next game with shots like that. But it does show that he's got the potential to do that. And I think that Konecny's a guy who's got the potential to beat a goalie off of a rush. And so I think those are the types of things that are going to be important for this team. And that's how young kids take steps forward. And that's what I talked about with Bunneman, where he's improved his skating, he's improved his face-offs. Now you've got Farabee. Okay, well, he's clearly improved his shot. He's put some weight on. And those are the types of little things that are going to help this team keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a note with Farabee, he becomes the third youngest player with a hat trick in franchise history. Of course, 4 of those were Eric Lindros, which is amazing.
I know. Amazing, isn't it?
And
wow.
Yeah, Sean Couturier was the youngest. I think, what was that in the playoffs versus Pittsburgh?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, in 2012. But yeah, Eric Lindros in 92 twice, in 93 and 94. He was 19 and 20. And
now, question, Isaiah, since
yeah.
you're old school like me, and you can look back, and since you were just talking, Dan made a good point about that wrister. When was the last time the Flyers really had a light out wrister? I'm not talking about a clean sniper, but you know, a good somebody who had the best wrist shot that could hide it well, like you were saying.
Oh, Jeff Carter.
Yeah, probably. That's how many years ago now?
Well, he got traded in 2010, so 2011.
Almost 11 years. Yeah, 10 years.
I mean, Gagne was one of the best pure snipers they've had in the last 30 years. I mean, he had every shot. Dan, you want to weigh in on that?
No, I was just, Jeff Carter, man, he was just, talking about north-south speed with an unbelievable wrist shot. It was fun to watch him get going with that. And yeah, Gagne had a really good wrist shot too. And I don't think that any of the guys on this team are going to be the pure sniper. But again, I don't know if you necessarily need that to win the cup these days, but just being able to have guys that can, from time to time, shoot it like that is a big deal. You know what I mean? Like a Farabee and Drew can still bring it. But yeah, it's been a long time since this team has had like a pure sniper. I mean, those guys are hard to find, you know.
They really are. I mean, when teams have to guard particular areas of the ice and try to deny the player, like, you know, the opposite circle for players like OV, Line A, and Stamkos, they're just deadly, particularly in the power play. Chef?
Yeah, I just have a question for Dan. If we're going to look at some of these prospects, is there anybody down there, maybe one person comes to mind that has a potentially good sniper-esque, not necessarily a sniper, but maybe a really good wrist shot that maybe we can look forward to seeing on the future sometime?
No, yeah, I mean, it's a great question. You know, the kid that they took in the first round this year, Tyson Forrester, one of the reasons that they took him was that from what everyone was saying, it sounds like he has the best shot of any player in the draft this year. So, you know, they took a kid who's got to work on his skating. He's got to work on, you know, probably his defensive play, but he has a huge upside with the shot. I would say that he's probably the only prospect you're looking at that's got the potential to be like a NHL level, really good sniper. The other prospects, obviously Cam York and Zamula are defensemen. Bobby Brink is a very good player, but he doesn't have a shot like that.
Now, what about Wade Allison? I've heard that he's had a pretty good shot.
Yeah, no, Allison's got a good shot, but you know, there's a difference between having a pretty good shot college level and NHL level. When I'm talking sniper, I'm thinking of guys like, you know, Line A, Pasternak, those kind of guys who are just so deadly.
Absolutely.
Talking about Allison, it just kind of sucks, right? Who knows what's going to happen with the AHL season, because some of these guys are going to lose like a year of legitimate development. But yeah, I am excited to see Allison. I wouldn't get too excited about his offensive potential yet, but
no, I wasn't. I was leaning towards saying that everybody thinks we have all these prospects and they can just fill any hole that we have in the thing, and we got to understand. People have to understand. Okay, yeah, that's great, but a lot of them are not even developed because of COVID, 2 because of injuries, and stuff that just regular things that happen along the way, and they're just like, oh, we just bring up another guy, and that's not always the case.
Yeah, no, and the Flyers are probably in a better position than most teams in terms of bringing guys up because Ron Hextall spent so many years compiling draft picks and taking kids. So the Flyers probably have more depth than most teams. But you're right. I mean, it's a big jump for a lot of these guys going up to the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, the Flyers have a lot of, along the upper echelon, a lot of mid-six type players that have high floors, not necessarily like Cole Caulfield, if you want to look at it. A team like Montreal drafted him. We passed on him to get Cam York and essentially Bobby Brink. And that's something I'll be paying attention to because those are tough players to find. But, you know, having that kind of depth in the organization and then getting a chance to draft somebody like Tyson Forster, who's known for his shot, if he could just get his skating together, and it apparently is, you know, they should be okay in that regard. And there was always free agency after expansion.
Hey, I have a question, Isaiah.
Yeah.
You that's like, I just realized that that's probably the third or fourth time you've mentioned that Caulfield and Cam York thing, that you'd be keeping an eye on it. Do you feel that they should have taken Caulfield?
I think you should always draft the best player.
Okay.
And they feel that Cam York was a better player in terms of it. Maybe they felt Caulfield is hit or miss. In other words, yeah, if he hits, he's going to be dynamite. But but the chances of him, you know, flaming out, maybe whether it's because of his size or something else in his game, maybe his game is not as strong when he's not scoring. I mean, whenever you have those elite level shooters, sometimes if things don't go their way, the rest of the game kind of falls apart. Like Eli Tolvanen comes to mind. Dan, maybe you could step in and comment, you know, with your expertise in that regard.
Regards just York against Caulfield, basically.
Yeah, and the way that the Tolvanen was a guy everybody wanted, and he's, you know, he just can't stick because the rest of his game suffers when he's not scoring, and apparently.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a lot of these kids who come out and they're big, gaudy goal scorers in juniors or in college, and everyone wants to draft them because they want the sniper, and they don't realize that, you know, a lot of those guys, either their shot doesn't translate to the NHL or they can't, they're not good enough to get themselves in a position to score goals like that in the NHL, right? And like a guy like that is right. Eli Tolvanen's a good example of that. Everyone wanted him when we traded for that first round pick that year, and we ended up taking Morgan Frost. And obviously Frost has had some growing pains and now he's out with the shoulder injury. But I think that anyone would say that Frost right now is a higher level prospect than Tolvanen. Another guy who we saw when the Flyers played the Islanders was Kiefer Bellows, and everyone wanted the Flyers to take him, and maybe they should have because they took German Rubtsov instead, who's not very good at this point.
No.
But it's not like Kiefer Bellows has blown the doors off. Oliver Wahlstrom is another example, guy on the Islanders who they took in the top 11 or 12. We took Farabee shortly after, and despite the fact that Wahlstrom was known as the big sniper that year in the draft, Joel Farabee, who was on his line and setting up Wahlstrom for a lot of those goals, at this point looks like he's a better NHL goal scorer than Wahlstrom. So it just kind of goes to show you like how different guys' skill sets can evolve. And Cole Caulfield is he's got a great shot, and it's not just a shot. He's a very good stick handler, but is he going to be good enough at the NHL level to get himself into the position to score goals like that? I don't know. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I think that Cam York was just as good, if not better than him in the World Junior Championships as an all-around player, and he was the captain of the team. But I think the jury's still out on Caulfield versus York. But yeah, it's a lot of these times these big-time goal scorers in juniors and colleges for whatever reason, don't become that kind of goal scorer in the NHL.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell. He's a small guy, but, you know, Dino Ciccarelli wasn't a big guy either, but. So we move on. Just before we close out today, I have to talk about, Dan, I want to go back to you. Phil Myers was all over the place last night. And it really just goes to show you, in my opinion, he is right behind Provorov. 1-2. Those two guys are the best two defensemen on the ice. When Myers has it going on, he's as good as anybody. And his skill package is, to me, is actually better overall in terms of skating and just every drill you could imagine. He probably wins.
Well, that's what I said before the season was like, if you are just putting the top pairing together based on talent, it's got to be Provorov and Myers. And they wanted to keep Sanheim and Myers together. By the way, how about Myers having that injury? First, people are saying he's out 4 to 6 months with a knee injury. That report came out at some point. That was completely wrong. They said it was 4 to 6 weeks with a rib injury, and he's literally back playing like a week and a half later. I mean, he's like Superman. I mean, and he's the guy who, you see him with his shirt off in the locker room, and he looks like he's like a Greek god, like the way that he's built. He's not, as he has had an injury history. I mean, he's had concussions in the past, and he had an arm injury in juniors. So he's a little bit more injury prone than guys like Provorov and Sanheim. But his recovery from these injuries is unbelievable. And yes, he's just a very, very, very good hockey player. It's nice if Shane Gostisbehere can keep it going on the top pair, but you'd think that at some point it's gonna be Provorov and Myers for this franchise. He really is. He's just got all of the talent in the world.
He's something. I don't know how he wasn't drafted, but thank God that worked out. And if we can get a double dip with Zamula coming down the road the next year or two, that'll make up for German Rupsov and who's Pascal Laberge. God bless him, right? But
well, that begs the question: does Gustafsson break this lineup again ever?
Yeah.
That's going to be tough. It's going to because you're rotating that third line of misery.
That was a bad signing. Dan, can we just say that this guy isn't? I mean, I see the passing, I see the vision, I see the puck getting through from a point. I mean, it was just a bad signing. He doesn't fit.
It's a bad fit. I said, and this is another thing I said, when the Flyers signed him, it was like basically you're trying to fit round puzzle pieces into a square hole. It just didn't fit with what the Flyers needed because they already had Shane Gostisbehere, and Gustafsson's not really a guy you want playing on your bottom pair. So it was a weird fit. It was a bad signing. I like Nate Prosser. I like the game he played. I wouldn't mind seeing him get back into the lineup on that third pair with, Braun is just, I said before the season, I thought he was going to take a big step back. He's not been good at all. Haig has been terrible. Gustafsson's been terrible. That third pair is it's a real problem right now.
They're gonna get a defenseman at some point. Maybe
they're definitely going to trade for a defenseman. They've got to do something at some point. Maybe one of those Arizona defensemen, either Demers or Hjalmarsson.
Yeah.
I think Arizona's got another defenseman too, who's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year.
I got to check that out.
Who I'm thinking of.
You're probably
they've got Goligoski. I mean, they've got a triumvirate of unrestricted free agents at the end of the year: Goligoski, Hjalmarsson, and Jason Demers. I wouldn't be surprised if the Flyers pick one of those guys up at some point.
Yeah, I mean, Demers is right-handed, I believe. So, I mean, it's not the number one consideration. A lot of it depends on the health status. If somebody like Sanheim is out, they might go bigger with somebody like Goligoski.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter because it's probably going to be a third pair guy you're looking at. I don't know if you want any of those guys on your top pair. Maybe you do. But yeah, I don't know. I guess we're going to have to see. Maybe some other guys will come available. I mean, who knows? Maybe Vancouver's out of it and Alex Edler's on the block. I mean, the Flyers are going to have hopefully banked about, between 4 to 6 million that they can trade for at the deadline. And there's going to be some decent defensemen who should be available at that time for draft picks.
Yeah, it just burns me that they wasted that cap space with Gustafsson. But we got to move on. Hey, here's some good news, Chef. Nolan Patrick took a big hit last night, and his hair went flying everywhere. But he's okay. I don't like seeing him get abused like that in the corners. But it's just a really good sign that he was able to take a hit where his head got crunched. I think it was Pollock. And he came out of it okay.
Yeah, there's two things I take away from that. One, that he's able to take a hit, and that maybe the migraine problems he had are not related to concussions, which is a good thing, which is great. I'm so happy for him. The second thing is they're getting beat up, man. This team is they're getting pushed around, and they in the past you would have had like a Simmer or somebody else, maybe not Hartnell so much, but he was scrappy. You had guys in the past that would kind of like subtly tell you that you can't do that anymore by either stick play or a little extra shove in the corner, like we're not going to take that. I fear that they're just going to get continued. The bullies are getting bullied. It's going to continue to go that way, and that is something long term. I think that they're going to have to look at, because you especially around playoffs when it gets even scrappier, you just don't have the guys that can contribute, and on both sides of being a tough player and also being able to put some points on the score sheet too.
No, I agree. I think that's an area they will address. They know they got pushed around. I mean, after all, they chased Sam away from the defense and put him up on the forward ranks. But in the playoffs, Sam Moran's not going to be able to keep up. So no. I do think they're going to get somebody who's going to bring at least some sandpaper, some physical pushback, something the Flyers will need at least in the playoffs. So
did you notice that? I know that they were talking in pregame, and I was looking for it, and then I didn't see anything. I know that Sam was talking smack with, I guess, Martin, was it?
Yeah, Matt Martin. They agreed. Yeah, they agreed to fight, and Martin said yes. But then the Flyers got up in that game, and Moran, when Martin wanted to go, Sam smartly said no.
Good for him.
Yeah, because it wasn't going to help his team, and Sam, it wasn't the most consequential 5 minutes. At one point, he started playing. It looked like he started playing defense.
Yes, I saw that. That was my next point I was going to bring up. He dropped right back into his defensive role. I'm like, where are you going? You're a forward. Go up.
Yes, he's on the power play for the other team. All right. I think there's one last topic before we go, and I'll just cover the schedule. Let's panel this. We didn't get a chance to discuss the Pierre-Luc Dubois, Patrick Laine trade. I'll weigh in with my opinion here. I think Columbus did about as well as they could getting Laine and Jack Roslovic for Dubois. They were in a tough spot. And it should be interesting to watch where these two players end up in the next couple of years, whether they stay where they're at right now or whether they continue to move on and chase some dollars. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for sure they did about as well as they could. And, if I'm Columbus, it doesn't seem to me that Laine is the kind of guy who's gonna like playing for Tortorella either. So, I'm almost now trying to shop Laine to someone else. I don't know if he's injured. I know he hasn't played a game yet for Columbus. That's correct, right?
I think he's going to make his debut. What didn't it have to do with protocol?
Maybe, yeah. I guess it had to do with the protocol of getting traded.
Because it was a Canadian team, right?
Yeah. So he hasn't
crossing the border,
yet,
probably.
But it's hard to imagine for me. He's the kind of guy who's, if he had problems playing in Winnipeg, is he really going to play in Columbus? I don't know, but I think, yeah. I mean that trade, basically they traded two problems for each other, and that was the only way they were going to get players of that value, because Luc Dubois had put himself in a position where it was clear he wanted to be traded, so other teams weren't going to give up a whole lot that was meaningful for them, and I think that I think it was a good move for both teams. I think that Winnipeg probably did better because Dubois is a better all-around player, but I'm interested to see what happens with Laine in Columbus.
Yeah, that'll be worth watching. Dubois will make a bigger impact, and at least for this year, Winnipeg could be a team worth watching if they could pick up a little more defense. Chef, I think I made a little joke that Torts will keep Patrick and Laine, right? But I don't know about that. So what's your take on this before we get rolling?
I think he has a potential to help his game out a lot. Torts is a very focused coach. I think it's just, I think you've said it before, and I think I've said it too. At a certain point, he starts to lose his team when he becomes a little too much, let's just say. So hopefully it doesn't wear thin. I think he's got a good chance to make a difference in Columbus, but we'll see. I just don't think that's going to be the landing spot for him. I think he'll eventually get moved somewhere else, whether it's at the trade deadline this year or at the draft this summer.
Yep, and it could be for another center. We'll have to take a look at that.
Yep.
So gents, with the schedule coming up, the Flyers play the Bruins at home Wednesday, Friday. Then they have the Capitals in Washington, the 7th and the 9th. Then hopefully the Devils have their coronavirus situation straightened out by the 11th and the 13th. And those are the next 3 sets of back-to-backs for them. And we'll come back and talk to you about that, either the 14th or 15th, and maybe look for an O&B special in between them. So until then, let's get our social media coordinates all straightened out. Dan?
So you can find me on social media at Twitter on @dsilver88. Throw me a follow, and I'll have some Flyers opinions, maybe some videos for you to check out.
Terrific. Chef?
You can catch me at Chef to Left B on Twitter.
Great. You can catch me, Isaiah, at Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Isaiah, don't forget the underscore 520. And of course, you can follow the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. We have a Facebook page. We are also on the platform Gab at O&B Puck, which is trying to reach out as many people as we can with the show. And if you could give us a rating and a 5-star review, if we've earned that, at Apple Podcasts and whatever platform that you use. We have so many. We really appreciate it. It moves us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts. We're on SoundCloud. We're also on Spotify, iHeart, and so many other, a total of 12 platforms, Stitcher, TuneIn. Chef?
Yeah, and don't forget, patronize our sponsors. You got Jim Steaks on South Street, and you have Summit Public Adjusters, too, brand new sponsor. So make sure if you can, give our sponsors a look.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate that, and tell them the O&B Puckcast sent you. And with that, until next time, take care.